In 2010 was we embarked on first social media strategy. So we looked at what it was people were saying. Where were they having conversations? What were they saying about policing? What were they saying about us? And where were they saying it? And we looked at that buzz monitoring. We looked at what the organisation wanted to do. And we then came up with our first social media strategy, which took us really, we focused very heavily on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube and Flickr. I have my views about each one of them. I think the most horrendous place to live is YouTube. And the nicest place to live is Flickr, because everybody loves everybody on Flickr, and on YouTube we never even let comments happen on the videos because it's just awful. So we did the first social media strategy, and within that we set out exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to move from broadcast to engagement. So we wanted to move to having conversations with people. We took that to our chief officers, and there's some colleagues from Gloucestershire, so they'll know what I'm talking about. When we took this to them and we explained what we wanted to do, and they agreed it straight away, which meant that I thought they don't know what they're agreeing to. I think it took them some time before they realised actually what they'd agreed to, because what that did in that first strategy was said, we are going to train frontline officers to use Twitter and Facebook, particularly Twitter at the first point. And we were going to start, and there's a photograph of our first one in the corner there, which was a PCSO called Ben, who was GMP Didsbury, and in 2010 became our first account. We trained him, we gave him some support, and he just did it on a daily basis. And we did quite a lot of work with the media as well at that point, as well as internally, because people kept saying, but he's not going to be doing police work, he's going to be stuck, on his phone and this, that and the other. So we sent the media out with Ben, and we did quite a lot of work internally so people could understand. Actually, all he's doing is having a conversation. It just happens that he's doing it through a different medium. And back in 2010, if you think back sort of 3 years, it was perhaps for some people quite difficult to get to grips with. So we got some support from the chief officers to do it. We started the work with the local officers. If everyone remembers, I'm not even going to go because it's 3 years ago and it's very old now, but we did the Twitter Day, which was born out of a conversation with the chief where he said he had a good idea, which is always a worry. And what he wanted to do was to get people to understand everything that we deal with in policing that isn't actually real police work. It isn't about just locking somebody up. The mental health issues, finding people who've wandered off from hospitals. There was lots of ways we could have done it. We could have taken the media out. We could have shown them all what goes on in the call centres. But because we've been doing the work on social media, it just seemed sensible to do it through Twitter. So that's how it came about. It wasn't because we wanted to kind of go, look at what we can do on Twitter. It was actually about trying to get some business benefit. For us as a team, embarking on sort of a new approach to social media, it suddenly showed the impact that it could have. We spent no money, and we became the top trending subject on Twitter for about 24 hours. It got loads of media coverage. So for us, it suddenly started to actually, there's some big benefits in using this in some way. Back in 2011, and I know it happened in Birmingham, but it was all London's fault really. But when we go back to the disorders, we call it disorder because if you call it rights, it means we have to pay people money. Back in 2011, we had the disorder. We'd seen it happening in London, and then obviously I think that was towards the end of the week, and then over the weekend it started to move into Birmingham, Liverpool. And we knew that it was going to come to Manchester because that's it was a kind of inevitability to it. On the Monday, because we'd seen all that over the weekend, on the Monday, we'd started to get people asking us questions, particularly through Twitter and Facebook, way before the media ever contacted us to say there's rumours that things are going to happen in Manchester. Probably a good 4 hours between the first people going, we're hearing that things are going to happen in Manchester, before we had any media calls on it. What we decided at that point was we wanted to try and manage the rumours. We wanted to become the trusted voice, and we wanted to become the place where people would go for information, which meant that we needed to be really honest if we had issues, and if we didn't, then we could quash those rumours. It was very much like if you saw any of what came out of Boston police after the bombings, that was their big thing. They were desperately trying to say, look, don't listen to the rumours that and things that are circulating. Come to us and we will give you the definitive. It's a very difficult position that it puts you in when you know you're going to have to put out that there's trouble here and there's trouble here, because inevitably people don't want to. But we wanted to be the trusted voice, and And I remember on the Tuesday morning, we had trouble on the Tuesday afternoon. On the Tuesday morning, we were in what we call a gold meeting, big meeting with all kind of people from various parts of the organisation. And I remember putting my hand up and asking what the intelligence teams were doing to monitor social media. And they kind of looked at me and went, we'll deal with it outside the meeting. Because they hadn't thought about it. It's all information that's just there in the public arena. For them, they work in a world of covert kind of intelligence gathering. So it was a very different experience for them. So what we ended up doing from when we had trouble was basically I lost one of my web team to work with them because they had to understand the difference between what's one person tweeting and 10 people retweeting and 10 people tweeting. Because actually 10 people saying something's happening is of more relevance than one person saying it and everybody else circulating it. So there was lots of nuances about how social media works that we had to kind of help them with. I have to say, since that, and over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of work with them. We've done a lot of training. So now, actually, they're a lot. You know, we don't work with them in the same sort of way. They do a lot of stuff now easily because they understand how it works. But we could see the benefits in terms of how social media was becoming much more kind of integrated across the organisation. Somebody said to me the other day, but this isn't a communications role. This isn't what you should be doing. But actually, because of the blurring and boundaries, the stuff we do works into the investigation and into intelligence and across all kinds of remits. We can't say, that's not my job, and I would never want one of my teams to say, it's not my job, so I'm not going to deal with this just because it's coming to us a different way. So we had two pockets of trouble. I won't bore you about the details. They were both very different, though. Manchester, it was people going out, very much like London, attacking. For some reason, Foot Locker seemed to be the place of choice. And just looting goods. Salford was very different. It was organised criminals trying to divert police officers to cause them injury. So there's two very different things that were happening. But what we found very quickly was, apart from people, you know, kind of wanting to know what was going on and kind of insatiably asking us questions about things, they actually said, have you seen that such a body's done this? And amazingly, people are really nice and they post pictures on Facebook of themselves with their shoes. Or we remember with one with about 4 or 5 iPads that he'd taken, which is really helpful because then we could put all that information somewhere so that the investigation team can then go and deal with it. So for us, as I say, we could suddenly see it became like a massive home watch where everybody was going, have you seen this? Have you seen something else? And we see that on a daily basis, where if there's a problem with something that somebody's put out, there's a problem with what somebody's saying, or you know, it's racist, or it's whatever, people will tell us. We don't actually have to go looking for lots of things because lots of people will tell us. So for us, it became a truly operational form of communication, and we were so integrated into what was actually happening. It was much less about what's the media saying, how's this working, and whatever else. It became what's the mood on social media and what are people saying. There are lots of stories about how we didn't get it right, and I can go through those in lots of detail, but I'm keeping this quite tight because I'll ramble otherwise. We put out tweets that people didn't like. We've had to apologise. We've had to take them down. We don't get it right all the time, but what we try and do is say to people, hey, do you know what, we're trying to learn this in the same way that everybody else is. So sometimes we're not going to get it right. I was saying before, I have a 90-10 rule, and I've stuck to this with chief officers all the way through. 90% of what officers put out will be fine. 10% we'll have an issue with. If that issue is just because they've got over-exuberant and they've just got a little bit excited, or they've just not quite understood the implications of what they've done, then I'm fine with that. Let's just worry about the ones where things actually do, you know, deliberately go wrong. The last thing that I want is to have officers that are castigated or put through professional standards for things they do, because we just won't get anybody wanting to do it, because why should they put themselves into that difficult arena if they're going to face kind of grilling every time something happens. And believe me, we've appeared in the Daily Mail a few times for things, and thankfully we've never knee-jerked to deal with them. What it showed us is that we needed to rewrite our emergency plans. Anybody working in sort of, you know, any kind of public sector, you have emergency plans. It usually involves something happens. We then, over a period of time, decide when we're going to go and tell the media. We have a press conference. This is how it works. Get partners together. Don't work like that anymore because it all breaks on social media, and actually you haven't got time to do all that, and there's too much information out there. I'll explain kind of how practically that manifested itself with the officers in a minute, but so we had to rewrite the plans because it involved a whole range of different roles which had never been considered. Part of my frustration, I'll start to share my frustrations with you. Part of my frustration is that exercises now that take place don't take any account of that. And they've not yet caught up, so that they're not building social media into the exercise planning that goes on. And the boundaries were blurring. Definitely the boundaries between what the media do, what social media does, were blurring. And some for the good and some that with difficulties, as we know. What we did see was a lot of outpouring of people wanting to say nice things to us. We had officers working 12-hour shifts, and the people on social media wanted to say, you know, thanks very much for what you do. We made sure we circulated those messages internally, and we got a lot of positive feedback from officers saying, do you know what, I've had a really hard 12 hours with things thrown at me and running through the streets of Manchester, wherever it might have been. But I'm doing it for all those people that have become the kind of, they've gone from being a silent majority to having a voice on social media. And it's those people I'm working for, not the people I've just faced for the last 12 hours. And we saw a massive increase in people wanting information from us. So we went up on the Twitter account to over 100,000 followers during that week. We only had one night of trouble. We did a whole range of things. We made sure it was integrated. Social media didn't sit in anybody else's kind of bit of what we were doing. The communication was across. So everything we did with staff, we were doing with the media, we were doing on social media. We just did it on social media, I think, first, before we did it in other places. The press conferences we did all went straight onto YouTube. One of the biggest things we did was the next day, because people have been helpfully posting pictures of themselves with their goods, and because people were telling us about bits they'd seen or were giving us information, we had a whole range of CCTV footage and images of people that we were looking for. So after the Tuesday night where we'd had the trouble, on the Wednesday morning we had immediately we set up a special Flickr site. We didn't want the pictures to appear with, you know, dogs and horses and helicopters, whatever else. We wanted a special site. So we set up a Flickr site with those images of these individuals that we wanted to find. We'd also done some standard PR stuff, like we had some vehicles going around the city centre with pictures on. What in the review that happened, as everything gets reviewed, in the review that happened, one of the officers said that on the Tuesday night, everybody was operating as a group. There was a big crowd and there was no personal responsibility because they were all just in it together. But by the Wednesday morning, we'd managed to split them into individuals, so they had to start taking individual account of what had happened. And they put that down to part of the reason that we didn't have any other trouble. However, it did rain the next day, which is always a good thing. So we were also getting from that people who posted. Remember, we posted one picture up and then somebody posted underneath, I know who this is. I know who this is. I'm going to phone the number. And with the ones that were going around the city centre, we actually had one guy stopped. I think we were doing a bit of a media thing, and he said, that's my son that's on there. Here he is. Which is like, thanks very much. So it just showed the sort of things you could do and how quickly you could get the information up there. And we've carried on trying to have conversations with people dealing with service issues. And the kind of next sort of big thing that happened for us was obviously last year, which is just coming up. We just had the anniversary. And to talk about how quickly social media works, really, for us, obviously we'd had a wanted person that we've been looking for about a month, and there'd been a whole range of issues with that. And on the morning of the 18th, I was in the office, and one of the staff, one of the press officers, was who we get to see all the logs that come in, and she said, "Oh, we found him." And at the same time as she was telling me, "Oh, we found him," and you're kind of thinking, "Great," and then she quickly said, "But it looks like officers are injured." We were reading it on Twitter because people who lived in the area were posting things. Because whereas before you'd probably get an hour or two before somebody, they'd phone the local paper, they'd then phone you. No, these people can just post exactly what they're seeing straight onto Twitter and Facebook. But for us, that changed how we dealt with what was happening. In the first press conference we did an hour and a half after it had actually happened, we gave way more information than we would ever have done if we hadn't been looking at what was happening on social media, because we knew the information was out there. We knew that people in the area knew it was officers. We knew that they were fairly sure that they were dead, and we had to deal with that. For us, we had to be aware of the family issues as well, because obviously we've got two families that have lost daughters. And one of the most important things for us was that very quickly we obviously knew the names, so we could go to Facebook and look at their Facebook profiles. One of them was fairly secure. The other one all kinds of pictures of her personal life. We got hold of Facebook and they made it so that the family had access only. So the media never got to see those pictures. And that was one of the most important things for us in dealing with the family, was because obviously for they want some kind of control over what actually they did give to the media and what photographs were used. So there was a lot of that happened, and as well on this we started to see people with outpourings of grief. So there was a lot of, not just police officers, but a lot of people just saying, you know, I'm appalled by what's happened, you know, and wanted to just send a message. So very quickly, well, in the space of about 3 or 4 hours, we had up an online book of condolence, because we knew that we wanted to keep all those messages so that at some point we would give them to the families. And it was good to hear on one point there was an interview with one of the families that happened on the anniversary, and they'd said, did you know that they'd actually been looking through some of those messages recently, and how comforting they found some of the messages that people have put out. So for us, that's like a huge bonus, because you think that's what we're doing it for. We did it to try and help them through what they're dealing with. And then we had the outpouring that came from the police service, a big network really of people, and as much as forces will vie for position, because obviously GMP are bigger than West Midlands, actually when things like that happen, everybody comes together. So what we suddenly found was there's an outpouring that came under the hashtag Cover for GMP, which was lovely. It was a lovely thought. Came from a blogger who blogged under the name Constable Chaos. I do know who he is now, thankfully, but at the time he was just Constable Chaos. And he had this idea that because it was obviously 2 funerals that were going to happen and the impact on the organisation, wouldn't it be nice if all the officers from around the country could come and work in GMP to allow friends and colleagues to go to the funerals. And we thought, oh, what a lovely sentiment. What a nightmare. Because we already had an investigation to deal with, because we've got somebody in custody, so we've got all the legal implications. And if anyone wants to know, we did get into trouble over some of, well, we got warned by the judge for some of the things that the Chief Constable had said earlier in the week, but we knew that was going to happen. But, and we had an intelligence gathering that was still taking place, because there were still other people that we were looking for in relation to the whole operation. We had 2 families that we were trying to support. We had 2 high-profile funerals that they had to organise. And in the midst of that, we've now got officers that want to come from around the country, because very quickly there was thousands saying they were going to come. And we didn't know what training they had. We couldn't really put them on duty. We couldn't take them from some kind of leafy part of, I'm going to pick on Surrey, or wherever, and plonk them in the middle of Moss Side and hope they were going to survive. It was just going to be a nightmare. And the Assistant Chief Constable, who was dealing with a lot of the funeral kind of arrangements, because there was a lot to arrange, said to me, just make it go away. And I can't make it go away. People genuinely want to help, so we had to find a way through. But in the midst of all this, it was really one extra thing that we, you know, we could have done without. But it was very nice, you know, to see what happened. But it took a bit of managing, and it cost us. We did come up with a plan which involved forces sending 2 officers that we could manage. That cost us, and we also then encouraged other people to come and line the streets. And they did, and you know, again, the families found that hugely supportive to see officers from all around the country, and some actually even abroad, that had come to line the streets. But the messages we put out, we tried to give the media as much as we can and access to things, but what we found was that actually they were taking a lot of the things that we were doing on social media and using them. So the good thing for me was we had 2 funerals that happened one after the other. So at the end of the second, straight one day after the other. Really difficult time for the organisation, quite emotional, as I'm sure you can imagine. But the Chief Constable did a message which we wanted to put out on social media, particularly because we'd had all this outpouring and this, you know, from officers and from other forces and from abroad and just from the members of the public. So we did a short message. And the media never asked us for an interview with the Chief, which was good, because you know he didn't need to do any interviews after he'd had the funeral to deal with. They used the message that we put out on social media. So for us, it was started to see that the lines that had started to blur were very blurred now. But it showed the kind of how the online can move into real action very, very quickly. Social media isn't just a community, there's communities within the community. So you need to understand whatever sector you're working in, who are the most influential people and what are they saying, and how can you link in with that. It's incredibly important, I think, is more and more people are just using it as a method of communication on a kind of daily basis. For us, we've invested in social media. We haven't had a huge amount of money. We haven't done it. Actually, we've only just spent any money on social media, and I can always talk about that later. But everything's been done on existing resources. We've taken a third cut in staff. Everybody within the comms team understands that social media is their responsibility, whether they're a press officer, whether they're working in PR, whether they're working in the web team. We make good use of apps and tools. I love apps. New things, free, that's great. Anything that's free is usually worth looking at, and we use them where we can. And we try to keep conversations going. During difficult times, like particularly the death of the officers and with the riots, it's really hard to keep messages going, and keeping the thing that we wanted to do, which was being honest and open and giving as much information as possible. And that can mean you have to do things that some of the organisation goes, well, why are we opening ourselves up that much? But we stayed true to the principles, and we continue to try and do that. But it's not all depressing. We have a lot of serious issues to deal with, but what we try to mix in with that is a bit of humour, and look at different ways of doing things. So what we've got up there is a website we set up called which is Drunk and Disorderly Inn. Coming up towards Christmas, people get drunk and surprisingly get arrested. So we did it as a spoof hotel website. It cost us £12, I think, to do that, with just staff time. And the 2 officers are actually real officers who are brilliant. Normally, to do all the messaging that we'd done around that would cost us about £4,000 or £5,000 worth of print. We had loads of people log on to it. We still use it now. That's a couple of years old, and we still find opportunities to reuse it. So it's a huge financial benefit, really, to being able to look at different things. And for my team, because they've got no money, and they literally have got no money, they've got to be innovative, they've got to be creative, and it's quite liberating that we can take some risks and try a few different things because, we haven't got any money to do it any other way. We use a lot of video, photographs and audio. The photos, people love dogs and horses, so it's always nice for us to be able to throw some dogs and horses pictures in. But we also make it about real people. So we try and show with all this, it's about the officers, and the officers that use Twitter and Facebook for their communities. And we've got more than 300 people now trained and that we work with. We want them to be a person, not just a uniform. That's the whole benefit, really. The social bit of social media is the most important thing, really, for us. And so when James was saying about get the young people, it's not about that. We've got some of our better ones are the officers who've been around for 20-odd years. They don't understand the technology. We can teach them the bits that they need to know about that. But what they can do is have a really good conversation. And that's what the biggest thing for us is. It's being able to have a good conversation with people. It's not about the technology. And we also have a bit of fun. So there was some that was our advent calendar last year where we had a wrapping Santa and various other things. We do evaluate. If we don't know that we're having a benefit, then why should we do it? We haven't got enough time, and we haven't got enough people and resources to be able to put it into things where we're not having benefit. We do monitoring. We look at analytics. We look at analytics from Twitter and Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest we use as well. And we also look at things like tweet level, things that were free, and we'll look at and various other things. And obviously, we have just invested in crowd control. I'm not endorsing it. But there are analytics in that we're going to start using. So we try and make sure that we can show a business impact. The information that we produce now on a monthly basis and a quarterly basis goes into our force performance meeting. So they look at it alongside what's the burglary rates look like and various other things. So actually, they start to take real account within the business of what's the flavour of what's happening on social media. We've been able to pick up loads of service issues. I'm probably going to run massively over time, so I'll try and keep it tight. But we can pick up people who say, I phoned and I've not had a response. I've waited 3 hours or 4 hours. Why have the police not turned up? And we can actually do something about it. Hopefully, either we can try and help them through it, or we can say to them, well, you know what, put a complaint in because you shouldn't have had that service. And we do that because there are some cases that we get through where people say what's happened and you think that's just appalling and it shouldn't have happened to you, and all I can say is put a complaint in and it will get dealt with. But we've had some real positives where we've been able to go back and because people complain publicly, we can go back publicly and say, here's what we're doing about it, and they go, great, thanks, that's really helpful. We continually look at what's coming up on the horizon and how we can develop for the future. And I have to show, obviously, for me, I've got to be able to show what I'm getting out of the people that the organisation's paying for. we've got an app. I'm very pleased with our app because it's based on geolocation. It's not a vanity app. It's an app based on giving people information about their area, which they can then hopefully help us find wanted people, missing people, have information about appeals that we've got in areas, and they can do all that based on wherever they are. We're up to, and this was from yesterday, for some reason we've seen a bit of an upsurge, I think, after iOS, but we're on about 18,000 downloads of the Android and the iPhone app. And those are all people now that we've got an access to, as well as, you know, the people that we know we've got access to via Twitter and Facebook. We've got another direct access. So we're constantly looking at new ways and new networks and where we can put effort into. We've found some uses for Google Hangouts. We just did a live streamed a web chat with the chief and the PCC on Tuesday night. We were able to use Google to help us do that because the technology. We couldn't go too I'm not going into why we couldn't use YouTube, because you should use YouTube, but we couldn't because of the systems at work. I talked about creativity and innovation. User-generated content. One of the things we started to do this year was take members of the public out, and we'll take them out with their neighbourhood team. They'll have a look, and we've took some out with traffic officers. They'll look at what the officers do, and they then post on Twitter, Facebook, or they blog about their experiences. We do not vet that. We have no control over what they write. And basically, if they write nice things, that's great. If they write horrible things, then we need to look at it and see what we need to do. Is it because they don't understand something? Is it because actually we're doing something that we shouldn't be doing? And we've seen some real positives out of that. And, you know, as I say, it's something that we've done a lot of the time. We often take members of the public out on raids to show them what kind of goes on. We've never kind of asked for something back, so, you know, they tell us what they think. We're moving to try and go to more 24/7, so on most of the accounts now that we're expanding the hours that officers are able to use it. We don't ask people to report crime on social media because of the problems we have with it, mainly due to the fact that they make themselves very vulnerable because they give publicly too much information. But what we do say is that obviously we're trying to extend some of that, and if people raise issues, we take them offline a lot of the time. I don't think we'll ever go truly 24/7 with the local accounts, but certainly we'll be doing the majority of the day, I think, and through night to early morning, particularly for like the city centre. And we're also looking at how we can do more online and how we can deliver services, particularly like online crime reporting, and how can we do things that people actually want. That's the kind of way we're going with that. I suppose I've probably taken up my 20 minutes. So that's me.